Hi, B Nation. Welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Thursday, October 17th. We are 2 days and about an hour and a half away from Notre Dame kicking off against Georgia Tech. 5-2 Yellow Jackets against the 5-1 Fighting Irish. Big game for Notre Dame. Trevor, you and I have broken the game down all week. And as we get ready to talk about our keys to victory, we're going to do game predictions, and Bill Bender and I are going to break down all the big games from the weekend. This is a game that's not getting a ton of national attention, but this in the world of Notre Dame is a huge, huge game for the Irish, Trevor. Huge, huge game.
Yeah, it's going to be a big one. I'm excited. I'm ready to rock and roll. There's a lot of questions about this team that I think could potentially be answered on Saturday. Again, offense and defense continuing to take the steps in the right direction. Defense more so just playing at the level that we believe that they can. But it's going to be a different kind of test this weekend. So excited for it.
And can they? Can they continue to play at that high level as the injuries continue to mount? Now you've got add Benjamin Morrison to the list, so that's another one to add to the list. I was thinking about this as I was getting ready for the show. I was like, man, like if you think about who we expected to be starters or key contributors at the beginning of the year, you've got 3 starting offensive linemen down. Jordan Faison, we don't know what his status is going to be on defense. No Jason Onye, no Boubacar Traore, no Jordan Patelho, no Jason Onye, no Benjamin Morrison. I know that no Jaden Mickey. I mean, they may not have Mitch Jeter, this weekend. We'll see kind of how that one goes. So, this is a team where your depth is going to be tested. This is not an excuse for not winning or not playing well. It's just, look, that's the challenge. And now your job as a football team is to step up and say, okay, yeah, they're down. Georgia Tech's like, hold on a second, we may not have Haynes King, right? So everybody's beat up this time of the year. It's who's going to handle that the best. And this is Notre Dame's opportunity to go make a statement this week. Well, they're going to make a statement this weekend, Trevor. The question is a statement a good one or a concerning one, right? Like that's right. The reality of it, right? Like we're going to know something about Notre Dame this weekend. We're going to learn something about Notre Dame this weekend. It's either going to be that this team is actually pretty good and they can go on the road and beat a very quality Georgia Tech team. Anyone that doesn't think this is a good football team is just paying attention to the names on the helmets and not actually watching this team or know anything about this team. And those are people like that. Had some knucklehead on Twitter the other day trying to tell me Louisville stinks. And I'm just like, all right, that's cool. You're probably someone who thinks there's only 3 good teams, 3 teams you can beat. The only good wins you can have. That's the reality of life. But that's what it's like at Notre Dame, man. Like Georgia Tech is not a team that you build your career off of. And that's accurate. But this is still an important game. This isn't a Notre Dame has arrived opportunity. It's not a Notre Dame is now a title contender. It's another very important step to finding out if this is a team that has the maturity, the depth, the talent, the leadership, and the focus to go on the road and handle business and string together yet another strong performance. And that's really what's been lacking from Notre Dame. We've talked about how, Marcus Freeman's longest winning streak is 2 games in a row. I would argue, Trevor, that even though his longest win streak is 5, the longest streak of actually playing really good football is not that long. I would argue, actually, it's a little shorter than that. And what I mean by that, Trevor, is, if you look at like last year, for example, Notre Dame starts the season off against Navy, plays really well against Navy, beats Tennessee State. You could argue the NC State game was really good. I didn't think they played well against Central Michigan. That was not a very good football team. Then they lost Ohio State, barely beat Duke, lost at Louisville. 2 great games in a row against USC and Pitt. And then you lose to Clemson, and then you win 3, play 3 pretty good games at the end of the year against some not very good opponents. You go back to 2022, you've got 2 wins over North Carolina and BYU, where I thought they played very well. Then you lose to Stanford. You don't play very well against UNLV. 2 back-to-back great games against Syracuse and Clemson. Yeah, they beat Navy. They didn't play very well in that game. You almost let Navy come back. So this stringing together just like really outstanding performances back to back to back to back is not something we've seen at Notre Dame. And honestly, it's not something we've seen from Notre Dame for much longer than the Marcus Freeman tenure. This goes back to the Brian Kelly tenure as well. And yeah, I know they went 11-1, but there's some really ugly wins in that stretch where they didn't play good football. They just had better players than the other team. Yeah. This is your chance to kind of say, hey, look, we're going to not only string together wins, we're going to string together playing at a high level. And that's something that is an opportunity for this Notre Dame football team to do this weekend, is not just win, but also to show, hey, we're going to start playing to our potential on a much more consistent basis.
100%. I think the toughest part, and I've been a Notre Dame fan for the majority of my life, and I've been watching this team. And when people get too wrapped up in like the meaning of a football game from a national perspective, it's different than what the Notre Dame perspective is. Brian, I think you hit the nail on the head. Beating Georgia Tech doesn't mean that Notre Dame is ready to go play for the national championship by any means. But if you lose to Georgia Tech, certainly means that you're not going to be playing for a national championship. At least that's what we're told on paper, right? There's things that could happen up at the top, but from a team readiness standpoint, if Notre Dame loses to Georgia Tech in week 7, that's just kind of the sealer, right? Like, so that's just kind of the narrative and the reality that you have when you follow a team like Notre Dame is you don't have the luxury of struggling against like a Minnesota and people are still willing to rank you and talk about playoffs and you know what I'm saying? But when you're a team like Notre Dame, not only do you have to beat good football teams in a team like Georgia Tech, you have to do it convincingly. So it's going to be what I'm looking for this Saturday.
For me, Trevor, it's not so much about winning convincingly. It's just playing good football. If you play good football and Georgia Tech plays good football and you win by a touchdown, all right, keep rolling. It's those wins where maybe you win by 10, but you look real sloppy doing it to where you play somebody good and that's not going to work.
Sure.
You beat Central Michigan by 24 points. You play like that next week against Ohio State, you're going to get beat. Well, guess what? They went and played like that the next week and got beat. Yeah, maybe you're talented enough to beat Duke by a late touchdown if you play that way, but you play that way the next weekend against Louisville, you're going to get beat. They played that way against Louisville the next week and got beat. So that's why I say it's not always just about winning. It's about winning in a way where you are playing to as close to your full potential as you can, which is what Marcus Freeman was talking about, last week, that got some people riled up about, he's like, it's not about stats. It's not about winning and losing. It's about playing to our potential. The point being, if you play to your potential against teams like Georgia Tech, the winning part takes care of itself.
Yeah.
And that's the process that Nick Saban always talked about. It's not about winning and losing. It's about playing the best we can, knowing that may look like a 40-point win some weeks, and it may just look like a 3-point win other weeks because of the quality of the opponent. But it's about playing to our potential, playing to our ability. That's really what the coaches need to emphasize, and that's what the leadership of this team needs to emphasize with this football team. So we're going to see if they can get it done, Trevor. We're going to find out here in 2 days. We've spent all week breaking it down. We're going to talk keys to victory next. We're going to dive into our predictions and, of course, some big predictions for this week. So big game, big opportunity, and I'm excited to kind of put the finishing touches on this breakdown. So, Trevor, let's get into it, man. Offensively, this is a big one for Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame has strung together 2 good performances in a row to varying degrees. We've talked a lot about the Louisville game. Yes, Notre Dame did not play great 4 quarters. Some of that intentionally, some of that because they were struggling to get things going, but they did what they needed to do. Fast start, strong finish, get the W. Come out against Stanford, strong performance. After the first series, you have that, but then after that, you kind of roll. Is that just playing 2 teams that maybe don't have the defenses you think that they have? One of them, the other team's not a good defense. Or is this kind of the beginning of a new era, so to speak, of the Notre Dame offense for the 2024 season? This is a great game for us to find that out. This is a defense that does some things well, but is not an elite defense. And it's one that if you're as good as you need to be to go play with some of those championship caliber teams down the road, this is the kind of team you need to be able to find some success against. And so we're going to break down the keys to victory for Notre Dame, Trevor, and you know where it starts. It starts with with starting fast. I mean, that's really where it's at right now. It's you've got to come out, and it's the reasons why are different every week, but you've got to come out and you've got to get off to a fast start. There's no question that that's going to be a vitally important piece to this game again this week.
100%. And you could make the argument that the defense has not started fast the last 2 games. So if anything, that puts it more on the offense to start the game and say, hey, listen, regardless of what happens with the defense, the standard that we – right, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. So the standard that we need to play to as an offense, right, needs to be we start the game fast, regardless of the outcome. Because if the defense comes out fast and the offense starts out fast, it's going to be an awesome game to watch for us as fans on Saturday, right? However, on the flip side of that coin, if for whatever reason the defense comes out and they're a little bit slow again, or God forbid there's a blunder on special teams, right? Regardless, the offense still has to start fast. So that should be the standard that they hold themselves to.
Well, and we get back to the things we've talked about, Trevor. It's about getting into an early rhythm. This team has been one that when they play at their best, they usually start well. They usually start fast. They're a team that I still believe is still teetering on, becoming a confident group and then losing that confidence. Like, I don't think the game and a half we've seen in their last two games is all of a sudden the receivers have full faith in Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard has full faith in the line. The Riley Leonard has full faith in the receivers. The coaches have full faith in the player. I mean, they're growing, but they're not there yet. You come out sloppy and struggle to move the ball in the first half against Georgia Tech, and all of a sudden that doubt creeps up again. That has been there for a chunk of the season. Coming out to a fast start is one of those things that allows you to say, okay, hey guys, we are that team. Let's go out and roll and really put, our foot on the gas and really take this thing over and really run through this team. So that confidence piece is still very important for this offense. There's some teams that Texas could get off to a slow start and it's like, don't worry, they're fine. They're confident. They know what they're going to do. It's like Oklahoma game. They didn't get off to a great start, but there was no shaking of confidence. It was like, as you could tell, Quinn was a little rusty early. That's a pretty good Oklahoma defense, but they figured it out and they rolled. I don't know that this Notre Dame team is the kind of team that can start slow and then all of a sudden figure it out. And that's kind of my question mark. And they need to start fast for themselves, and not even just you nailed the part about maybe you got to protect your defense. Well, protecting your defense is also you get off to a 17-0 start or a 21-3 start, something like that, and now that's even more pressure taken off the shoulders of your defense and your special teams. And so there's that aspect of it too. And then the final piece is this is going to be a pretty loud crowd. There's going to be, obviously it's in Atlanta. There's going to be a ton of Georgia Tech fans there. I expect a decent Notre Dame audience, crowd as well, but it's going to be a very loud indoors, makes it even louder, Georgia Tech crowd. Take them out of the game right away. Don't let that be a factor from the jump. And if you can do that, then you've got a chance to roll. If you make this a 4-quarter game, the longer this game is competitive, Trevor, a team like Georgia Tech, the more and more confident they're going to become. And this is a confident team anyway. They very much mirror their head coach. A little cocky, a little arrogant, confident himself. And I mean all those things in a good way, because Georgia Tech needs to be that way because they're not as talented as maybe some of the teams that they've beat so far this year. They don't have a better roster, in my opinion, than Florida State. You know what I mean? Like if you ask an NFL team, okay, you can pick players for your team only from one of these two rosters, I think a lot of people are still going to pick Florida State's roster, not Georgia Tech's, if you're talking about the next level. But they've got enough talent, enough confidence that they go out there and play like, honestly, a team that's maybe even better than they actually are talent-wise, and that makes them dangerous. It's because, like, you don't know that you're not good enough to play with us. You know what I mean? And you need to put that doubt in their minds right away in this game.
Yeah, I can't echo that enough. Georgia Tech is an extremely confident team, which is why they are a dangerous football team for Notre Dame to be playing. We've said it all week, man. Teams are not afraid to play Notre Dame right now, and especially not a team like Georgia Tech, right? They're a confident team. They do have talent spread throughout the team, but not in an abundance, right? Especially like when we talk about the defensive side of the football, a little bit of talent sprinkled in there, but it's nothing that's going to out talent Notre Dame from when you compare an apples to apples, right? But this is a team that's very confident, and that makes them dangerous. It's a neutral site game in Atlanta. It's going to be a raucous crowd. It's essentially a home game for Georgia Tech.
It is technically a home game for Georgia Tech. Even though you're correct, it's a neutral site, but it is a home event. They gave up playing, which I don't understand why. I do understand why. Like, is money that much more important to you than potentially winning? Remember when Syracuse did that in 2016? They were supposed to play in the Carrier Dome. I would be very curious to see how that game would have played out if that game was in the Carrier Dome in 2016 and a reeling Notre Dame team would just fire their D coordinator instead of playing it in MetLife.
Yeah.
Where there was a lot more Notre Dame fans than there otherwise would have been. But
Sure.
But to your point, Trevor, I mean, it is a crowd that is going to look for any reason to be fired up and want to win, because nobody cares about Notre Dame except when their team plays them and they want to beat them worse than anything in the world outside of maybe beating Georgia, right? I mean, that's kind of how fan bases are. Hey, we hate Notre Dame. They don't matter until your team plays them, and then you go nuts, and it's the biggest win ever, except over maybe your rival, and that's going to make it good. So, Trevor, what are some things that Notre Dame can do to get off to a fast start and be effective in this game? Well, one of the things is, look, the offensive line must play well. There's games where some of the opponents they play where it's like, dude, just be okay. Just be okay. Just get a body on a body and just be okay. And you're going to dominate that team. That was the case against Miami of Ohio. That was the case it turned out to be the case against Purdue. It was the case against Stanford. This is a game where I think they need to do better than that. I think they need to play well. I think they need to establish this thing early on. Georgia Tech is going to come out and be physical. They're going to be aggressive. They're going to take the fight to Notre Dame with their defense. They're going to try to punk Notre Dame a little bit, to be honest with you, Trevor. They're going to try to stuff the running game early. They're going to try to hit Riley Leonard as often as possible early in the game. And the Notre Dame offensive line needs to say, not today. Nope. Sorry, folks. We're going to run on you. We're going to give Riley Leonard time. Because if this becomes a skill-on-skill game, Georgia Tech has no chance against Notre Dame. Their ability to pull off this upset is going to come down to their ability to dominate at the line of scrimmage. And we need to see Notre Dame come out and play well up front. Not just do your job, but do your job and do it well. This needs to be one of the better games of the season, because this is a big, physical, veteran, strong Georgia Tech front seven, and they are going to try to punch Notre Dame hard and get Notre Dame to flinch. They're going to try to punk Notre Dame a little bit early. And why would you think they could do that? Because they've watched film of Notre Dame over the last couple of years, and they know that can be done. And it's going to be up to Joe Rudolph to have gotten his unit ready to play at a very high level this week, because if they play well, all the other stuff falls into place, and this offense will roll. I mean, there are other things that we'll talk about, but this, more than anything else, is the most important key of actually the practical specifics of the game. The start fast is sort of a bigger picture thing. When you get into the specifics of the play, this is by far the most important part, because this ties into third downs, turnovers, run game, pass game. It impacts everything. You know what I mean? And they are going to have to play at a high level in this game, in my opinion.
Notre Dame's offensive line has the opportunity to kind of stake their claim as to what the rest of the season is going to look like. And it starts against Georgia Tech. There have been some improvements that we've seen throughout the year. I mean, gradually getting better. There's been some individuals who have slumped off and came back on and slumped back off. But as a unit, I do believe that they have shown progress, whether it be major or minimal, over the course of the last, call it 4 games since Northern Illinois, right? So what they have to do, and I think you hit the nail on the head perfectly, it has to be early. It can't be, all right, well, now we're down. Now we got to stake the claim. Like, don't put yourself in that position. Come out with a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, because right now, if there is a glaring weak point on the offense, the offensive line is something that you could point to, right? Which is you're Notre Dame. Like, people refer to you as O-line U, and like that, the narrative has to change at some point. And there's a good opportunity to do it against this Georgia Tech team. They absolutely punked Florida State in the trenches in week 1. And that was a neutral site game. It was in Ireland, right? Like, it's so this is a team that has proven they can do it, because similar to Notre Dame, Florida State would out talent from a skill position wise Georgia Tech. And I don't think that there's an argument there, but they couldn't do anything. Their offensive and defensive line got pushed around at will, and Notre Dame needs to finally put their foot down as an offensive line unit and say, no more. It's time to kick it into gear. So, because to your point, everything starts with them. We can talk about Riley Leonard playing a good game and the game wreckers and Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price breaking out and having a good game that they need to, and the receivers having a good game, and Mike Denbrock can scheme up things schematically against Santucci, and it can all look great. Let's call a spade here. None of it works if the offensive line doesn't do their job first. Take ownership in what you're doing and have pride in what you're doing. So that's going to be I can't agree with you more. That'll be, outside of starting fast, my biggest key, because, I mean, it's even going to be hard to start fast if the offensive line isn't doing what they're doing. So I think they hold the key to a lot of success on Notre Dame on offense on Saturday.
We saw Georgia Tech too, and that's what we say when we talk about starting fast. Starting fast is not taking the first drive down and getting a touchdown. Notre Dame's done that a lot. They did that against Northern Illinois. Florida State did that to Georgia Tech, but they couldn't build on it. It has to be consistent, continual, and that can't happen without the offensive line. And then there's other aspects of it, and this is where the offensive line comes into play. When you talk about the pass game, as we get into key number 3, Trevor, yes, it's good that you've got to be an efficient passing game, right? Don't turn the ball over, move the chain, stay ahead of schedule. A lot of things we talk about a lot of times. But in my opinion, to really play at the level you're capable of, play at the level that you need to really dominate this game, not just win this game, but dominate this game, you've got to find ways to hit big plays in the passing game. Some of those can be on short throws that turn into big plays, and that's all fine and dandy. But Notre Dame still needs to find a more impactful vertical downfield passing game. Now, that doesn't mean just throwing a bunch of one-on-one go balls outside, although I'm not opposed to that. I mean, if they're going to give you cover one, at some point in time, you've got to have guys that can win those one-on-ones. You know, it's also about, some post concepts. I sent you a clip of a clip yesterday where, the quarterback we were evaluating in this clip they ran a double post, my favorite pass play. Guy comes wide open. I mean, he's 5-6 yards past the DB, doesn't throw it, and you miss an opportunity for a big-time play. You've got to protect it. You got to run good routes. You've got to have the quarterback's got to play well and make his reads and get the ball out on time. But it's got to be schemed up well too, Trevor. And that's why I say it's not just about finding go balls. It's about finding ways to use, post-snap switches to be effective. I'm trying to remember what game. I was watching some of the Ohio State-Oregon game. And again, another example of doing this. Evan Stewart catches a long seam route down the middle of the field. And say, well, yeah, they don't have an Evan Stewart. There wasn't a guy within 15 yards of Evan Stewart. He's a good player. He ain't that good. It was scheme. You ran an inverted stack alignment. The stack guy goes this way. The other guy goes that way. Creates confusion with Ohio State secondary. Boom, the seam route comes wide open. We've seen that with Notre Dame at times this year, and we need to see more of it because they don't have a receiving core that's just elite at winning at the line of scrimmage, and so those are all things that we need to see from this football team, Trevor, for us to know that this group is ready to go play at a high level and for the pass game to be successful. But you also have to design some stuff to give them chances to go make those plays as well. And so, yes, the line's got to protect, receivers got to win, quarterback's got to make his reads. But I still want to see a little bit more diversity in the pass game. Not a ton of variety, just a little bit more diversity. Switch up some more of those horizontal stretches with vertical stretches. Do some things to get guys running and in space. And you see it happen every week. I mean, everybody does it, and every good passing team does it. We need to see more of that from Notre Dame. And what frustrates me is when they have done it, it's been really effective. And I don't think it's one of those things that's only been effective because you don't use it very often. I think it's effective because it's effective. You know what I mean? It's just something that works, especially against modern pass defenses and coverage structures with all the different checks and calls and all this kind of stuff. I want to see that as well. The big play, the downfield passing game has to be, I don't say prominent like it's got to be every other throw, but it needs to be there. They've got to hunt for those opportunities. And then if they get called right, got to make the plays.
It needs to be prevalent enough where Georgia Tech and Tyler Santucci have to prepare for it every single drive. It's like, hey, listen, like this is a legitimate threat. It's not good enough to just do it like one time, take one deep shot. It's like, all right, guys, back off. Now we can start running the ball again. It has to be methodical. It has to be, when I mean methodical, I mean planned out. I mean, everything has to have a reason for why it's being run. Get your guys into space. There's different ways that you can soften up a tough front seven. And it's not just by throwing go balls. Like if you start hitting these underneath routes and getting your guys into space and letting your athletic wide receiving core go out and be athletes, it will naturally start to open things up, right? It will get the linebackers not playing as aggressive downhill because they've hit 4 or 5 crossing routes behind you or over the top of you, right? So there's a lot of things that I want to see Mike Denbrock do on Saturday, because I think it is fair to say that over at the very least the last game and a half, call it, between different quarters, varying quarters, that Riley Leonard is slowly starting to get into a rhythm. And so I want to see them build on that progress and let Mike Denbrock really open up this offense and saying, okay, now there's things that we've wanted to do all along. I don't want to call it like it's just a brand new scheme for this week against Georgia Tech. But there's things that I have to imagine that he's wanted to do all season that he hasn't been able to do it yet, whether it be between Riley Leonard not being in a rhythm, the line not blocking the way that they should.
Can you protect the quarterback's kind of a big ingredient to whether or not you can throw the ball more than 10 yards down the field.
100%.
Some people haven't put enough thought into that. Like, oh, they clearly don't have confidence in Riley Leonard to throw it downfield. I'm like, well, I mean, when they've given him time, he's done it. They've called it. He's made those plays. Can you protect it? And in some games, the answer is no.
Yeah.
Here's the final piece to me, Trevor, and this is our fourth key to victory for the offense. And that is, I expect them to rip off a couple big plays in the passing game. I do. I think they'll have some big, running game. I do. They'll hit a couple big plays most likely in this game because they've done it like every game. Against this Georgia Tech team, though, we need to see greater efficiency in the run game. That means higher success on the non-big plays, more 4-yard gains, less 2 yards and 1 yard gains. Limit the negatives in this game. This is a team that up front wants to eat up space, be physical, push you around, and just stone you. So first down, you're getting a yard, 2 yards. They don't create a lot of negatives, actually. If you look at the numbers, Trevor, their defense ranks 70th in the country in producing negatives in tackles for loss. And now part of that is because they don't have a lot of sacks, but they've got 30 run game stops. That's an average of about a little over 4 a game for a team that's played 7. So it's not a ton. It's a good number, but it's not a ton, right? And so what they do is they have a lot of run stuffs, 0-yard gains, 1-yard gains, 2-yard gains, because they're just physical, eat up space, and they fly downhill. For Notre Dame, you have to be able to turn some of those into 4s and 5s. By being good up front, getting a good push. Riley Leonard's got to make better decisions in the run game. That's actually where in the last couple of games where some of his biggest mistakes have come is actually not in the throwing game. It's in the running game. The run game breakdown that I put up last night. Thank you for not deleting that one, by the way. Did you see that play during outside zone where Riley Leonard pulls it and he runs and he ends up gaining 5 yards? That's a touchdown if he hands that ball off. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's at least a 15, 20-yard gain, if not a touchdown if he hands that ball off, right? Like you can't make those kind of mistakes in this game. Running backs need to see the hole and hit the hole. And there's a couple, misreads by the running backs last week, which happens. You just got to limit them to a degree. There was times where you'd had one guy on the offensive line letting somebody knock them back and right into the hole and then blows up the whole run. This needs to be a really effective game plan. Part of efficiency in the run game too, Trevor, is similar to last week. You've really got to mix up your looks. You've really got to mix up your looks. You've got to be able to say, hey, listen, we're going to do this, but we're also going to do that in that run game breakdown. So 39-minute video of the Notre Dame run game from Saturday. I broke down that pin and pull concept, and you guys could see it clear as day to the running back. If for a team that's king the running back, for Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price come down, it looked like inside zone. So the linebackers are squeezing down, playing inside zone, and then next thing you know, guards are pulling outside. They're running a double pull concept, pin and pull concept, and then boom, he's bouncing it out with room to work, right? And then all of a sudden, they're running inside zone, and they're thinking they're going to squeeze down a plate, and then boom, Jeremiah Love bounces outside for a big play because they had done some different things to kind of keep them off guard. You've got to still mix up your run game to not let Georgia Tech just pin its ears back and let you think that you're just going to run, quarterback power and inside zone and counter all day with an occasional, pin and pull concept. That worked against Stanford, but now Georgia Tech has seen that. You've got to have some wrinkles with your movement, with your play calling that makes it a little harder to key on them. So those are the 4 keys to success for the Notre Dame offense, Trevor. This is another great opportunity, as we talked about, for them to get rolling. I feel like a lot of the angst from Notre Dame fans that still exists still comes down to, and it's evident in that tweet that I put out yesterday. I'll put a tweet out and it's got one good stat and one bad stat. I'm like, I'm curious how people are going to react to this. And I knew how I was going to go. And like 9 out of 10 responses are negative. It's focusing on the negative number, which was the tweet was in 6 games this year, Notre Dame has played 4 Power 5 teams and Power 4 teams. And Notre Dame scored 42.3 points per game in those games. That's 3rd in the country. And against group of 5 teams, they're averaging 21 points a game. Oh, yeah, but what about Purdue? All right, cool. Take out Purdue. They're ranking 13th in scoring offense against Power 5 teams. Well, but what? It's like y'all can spend this as negative as you want. Guys, this is pretty good. But that's where a lot of the angst comes from. There's still a lot of people that don't think this offense is any good. Oh, you beat Stanford. They're not any good. Oh, you beat Louisville. Okay, Georgia Tech by themselves is not a team that, oh, wow, you scored on Georgia Tech. You're amazing. But it's about stringing these performances together where your offense looks good. That's the key. So I think this isn't a key to victory, but just if we see another strong performance, not only does it give you a chance to win this football game, but it helps your fan base feel a lot better about where things are. So
Yeah.
that's it. So let's move over to the defense, Trevor, and talk about the Notre Dame defense here real quick. This is another one of those things where it's like it's just do what you do to a degree, but can you do what you do without the personnel? That's what we're going to find out from Notre Dame this weekend, is if they can do that. But there is one thing that Notre Dame has to do differently in this game. Every week we're like, just do what you do. Notre Dame has not been good dealing with motion, especially fast motion, cross field motion, jet motion, running back motion. Georgia Tech naturally does that. They do a lot of that. We need to see this football team for Notre Dame have a better plan to handle that. Otherwise, it's going to result in some big plays and some chain moving plays from this Georgia Tech offense. So that's going to be a big, big key to me in this game, is for Notre Dame to have some success coming out and having a plan for that movement. And if they can, then I think they can, that's a really important step to keeping Georgia Tech in line.
I agree. I want to see Notre Dame's defense come out very similar to how they came out against Purdue, because I think that was one of the only games that they came out and they were basically like, it doesn't matter what you run, we're stopping it. And Purdue didn't do as much pre-snap motion, obviously, as Georgia Tech will. That's just not a major part of their offense. And when they would run motion, Purdue, when they would run motion, it was never anything that was that meaningful or as intentional as what Georgia Tech does. But I agree with you. They need to be able to come out, and that has been, if there has been one overarching weakness of the defense, it has been when opposing offenses do that. So I'm going to look at the Northern Illinois game. So it's going to be interesting to see what Al Golden does from a schematic standpoint when you factor in the losses of what they had on defense to game plan around that. But fact of the matter is that's a major key to victory, because if Georgia Tech is able to establish any sort of run game, it's going to be a long day. It's going to be a dogfight.
Yeah. Trevor, key number 2 for the Notre Dame offense, for the Notre Dame defense in this game is similar to the other side of the ball, and that is going to be right up the middle. The interior must dominate. The line has to play really good. The edge players are going to be very important in this game. But as far as truly playing to your best, it's got to be, once again, right at the middle. Notre Dame does not have the edge talent right now because of the injuries and Bryce Young being a freshman to really come off the edge with their end players and just get a lot of pressure on the quarterback. Some of it's going to have to be design pressures with the linebackers and different players. But the best chance part of that's because of that, but then also Georgia Tech their offensive tackles have been really good in pass pro this season. The only chance you have to really put any legitimate, impactful pressure on the passer is right up the middle, where your two best players on your front seven reside. But it's also the part that can be the most impactful. It's going to be damaging to Haynes King, who's going to be a lot harder for him to be effective running the football and stepping into throws down the field. And if they do have to play the backup quarterback, that is the worst case scenario for a backup quarterback, is to get pressure right up his face, because that's where panic happens. So let me rephrase that. For the offense, it's the worst case scenario. For the defense, it's the best case scenario. So Riley Mills, Howard Cross, Gabriel Rubio, Donovan Heinisch need to have a big game. They have to dominate right up the middle. The Mike linebackers play a role in that too. So when I think dominate the middle, it's kind of like when you're drawing up a Mike protection. It's like you've got the 4 linemen plus the Mike. Well, it's the 2 tackles plus the Mike. That's really where it comes from for me. So the 4 interior players, Drake Bowen, Kingston Viliama-Asa, they all need to play well, because it's not just about dominating at the point of attack in the run game, but that's going to be also key to making sure the cutback lanes aren't there, the misdirection runs aren't there. If the interior plays well, Georgia Tech has very little chance, in my opinion. If they don't play well, Georgia Tech can rip you up.
It's another one of those where we've seen the progression of the interior and from Drake Bowen and Kingston Viliama-Asa the last couple games. And now it's time, now it's to the point where it's like, all right, let's hope this has come to fruition now, because this is the game. This is the game for you to put it all together and play as a cohesive unit. You brought it up yesterday. It's no mystery that the middle linebackers and the linebackers that played in the middle of the defense had one of, if not their best game, when the interior defensive line had their best game. got to piece it all together against Georgia Tech.
So next key is and this kind of ties into that, Trevor, is Notre Dame needs to have early down success. Georgia Tech is in my opinion, a great first and second down offense. And when they're good on third down, it's because of their first and second down offense. They're a sort of middle of the road overall third down offense. They're at 50. They're ranked 56 in the country right now. In 7 games, they're at 42%. That's not terrible. It's not good. When they are good, it's because they are really thriving on early downs. They're getting 4-yard chunks, 5-yard chunks in a run game. They're getting 6-7-yard completions in the pass game. Their jet sweeps are going for 8 yards, getting them in 2nd and 2s. And then that also makes them dangerous for big plays. If you go back and watch a lot of their big plays this year happen on 2nd and short, 3rd and short, 1st down, they're really dangerous in those situations. They've got all their repertoire, all the different things they can throw at you. When Georgia Tech struggles as a throwing team and as an offense overall is when they're in situations where they're one-dimensional. Now, that includes dominating the run game like we talk about in key number 2, which that's what the interior really is geared towards, pressuring the quarterback and shutting down the run game. But if you can limit their first and down effectiveness, then you're going to get them off the field a lot more. If they're thriving on first and second down, it makes this game way more competitive and it makes their offense a lot harder to stop.
They're too good of a running team to be in 3rd and short. It comes down to that, plain and simple, which is why, to your point, first down success, early down success is so important, because Georgia Tech is a good passing team. Like, they can hurt you through the air, but similar to Notre Dame, they are a look to run first mentality type of team. And you have to be able to get them into 3rd and 6 plus, because then you are playing per Al Golden's overall philosophy on defense. You're playing into the strength of the defense. We'll see how that comes up with Morrison being out this week, but it is still, as a unit, your secondary, your pass defense is the best part of your defense. So early down success is huge.
And then the last one, Trevor, is easy. We'll wrap up with this one for our keys to victory. The last one's very easy. It's limit the big plays. I don't know that Georgia Tech, they may do what Stanford did in the first couple drives, get something going as Notre Dame's kind of feeling them out and trying to figure out how they're going to play. Louisville did the same thing. But eventually you're just not going to put up 4 or 5 scoring drives together where you get touchdowns where you go 75 yards on 11, 12 plays. You're just not. You're going to need some big plays on offense. And for Notre Dame, it's limiting those big plays and not giving up the chunk plays. They're going to get a couple, right? This is a good offense with talented receivers and a talented running back. And if Haynes Kings plays, a talented quarterback and a very veteran offensive line, they're going to get some big plays. Louisville got some big plays, but they limited those big plays. And one of their big plays ended up being a big play for Notre Dame, right? So you're going to have to limit the big plays and then create some on your own. That's going to be the final key to this game is just don't let Georgia Tech go off. Don't let them rip off 6, 7, 30+ yard gains. Limit those big plays. And if they do go for a big play, don't let them score. They get a 50-yard gain, tackle them at the 12 because your red zone your defense is pretty good. You got at least a chance of holding them to 3. And so those are big. These limit the big plays, especially the big scoring plays.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Trevor, we're going to move on to the prediction show next. But before we do, folks, do us a favor. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Give us a 5-star review. And I'm telling you, if you have not signed up for the message boards, you're missing out. Because you have 2 great, in my opinion, great breakdowns on there this week. All 22 film breakdowns. I broke down probably, 12 to 15, 12, about 10 to 12 run plays from Saturday at least.
Yeah.
Walked them through them, really dove into what they were trying to do, X's and O's, drawing stuff up, and then we let those plays run. Some really good stuff, in my opinion, if I do say so myself. And I think Trevor enjoyed it, but of course he has to say that, right? But hey, look, there's no need for me to be modest Irish English. If I think something's very good, should I not say that I think it's very good? Of course I'm going to say it's very good. It's very good stuff. It's why I think people should be on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So definitely check that out because that's the only place you're going to find it.
Mm-hmm.